Welcome to I'm Well Aware, the show that'll leave you more aware than you were before. I'm your host, Sabrina Schielein, and I'm here to help sift through the noise of wellness. Come with me on a never-ending journey to live a happier, healthier, and more fulfilled life. I'm glad you're here. I interview expert guests and people with incredible stories. We have a lot to learn from each other, so let's dive in. Brett Ender, what a special episode to sit down with you today. I'm so happy that you are in New York, that you're joining us.
I know. Thank you so much for having me. I feel like this has been a long time coming. We have our mutual friend Parker to really thank for this connection, but it's so good to see you, and thanks for having me on the show.
So great to see you. You are the co-founder of Noble Origins, and you're also the co-host of the Meat Mafia podcast.
Yes.
So thrilled to have you on today to really talk about wellness in the capacity of food and meat and what we put into our body. I love seeing all the content that you make. It's educated me so much, and I know that'll educate my audience as well. So really couldn't think of a better person to have on. So I really appreciate your time.
No, thank you so much for having me on. I think there are a lot of similarities and themes that we both explore in both of our shows. So I think it's going to be an amazing conversation, and we'll dig into it all.
Yeah, amazing. Let's jump right in, Brett.
I love it.
Let's talk about metabolic health and our food system over the past 50 years, how things have changed. I think a lot of people are starting to become more aware of what we're putting into our body and how it's affecting us, but really would love to hear it from you, what you've seen in your research and what you found to be true.
100%. I think it's a loaded question, but it's a great question to start. And so when I think about the current state of the food system and health in the US, a lot of what I think about is that with humanity in general, you know, we have incredible technological advancements. We've made so many strides in the last 50 years. But when it comes to our health, we've actually taken a massive step backwards. And one of the things I think a lot about is that we're basically the only species that doesn't know what actual foods we should be eating. You know, we don't know if we should be eating meat. We don't know if we should be eating plants, fruits, processed foods. There's like a lot of confusion around what is the optimal human diet. And then when you look at the health statistics, 7 out of 10 Americans are currently overweight or obese. So when you go to the airport, 7 out of every 10 people that are walking around are overweight or obese. We can't even manage our own body weight, which is crazy. 63% of all calories in the US come in the form of ultra-processed foods. So foods that have basically been artificially injected with processed sugars, vegetable oils, fats, like levels that have never naturally seen in nature. We're just eating those things 24/7. And there's also this like almost quiet consolidation that's happened within the food industry. And I don't know if you watched Food Inc. in high school. Did you ever see that documentary with Michael Pollan?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge science guy in high school, but I always remember my sophomore year watching that documentary. And it's an amazing film. So many of those themes in that film are still true, but he starts off the documentary kind of panning around the grocery store. And the things that he talks about are that there are 47,000 products in the average grocery store, but the majority of the products that are found in the inner aisle where all the processed foods are, they're really only controlled by about 10 companies. So like you look at all these different packages, box design, logos, different colors, you subconsciously assume that they're different companies, but they really all roll up to like the 10 companies, and they're all publicly traded. So their fiduciary responsibility is to their shareholders. That's not necessarily to the customer. So that if they can opt for a cheaper quality of sugar, a cheaper quality vegetable oil, a cheaper ingredient, they're going to optimize that because they're trying to juice as much revenue out of every single package of food that they ultimately sell. And that's really at our own detriment because these processed foods are essentially everywhere. You know, we no longer know how to connect with our local farmer. We're not necessarily eating the right foods. We're not exercising as much as normal. So essentially it's like we could spend 2 hours just discussing why the US is currently in the metabolic health crisis that it's currently in. But the good news is that I think there's a degree of control and autonomy that we all have. And the solution is really simple, which I'm sure we'll get into. But it's really a lot of these things that have changed around the last 50 years in the context of our food that has kind of led to us taking a big step backwards.
You're right. We could really go on about
for so long.
This initial topic, but thinking back to even high school when they would teach us about the food pyramid or they would teach us things in school, even like the way that we looked at, I don't know, authority or even these big companies that we see on the shelves, like you kind of think that people are taking care of you or that you should be trusting what you're seeing because it's in ShopRite. It's in these grocery stores that why would they put it out there if it was really that bad for you? But it's not that way. People don't have our best interests at heart all the time. And I think questioning it is really the first step to understanding the deeper cause and the root of, what's going on with our health crisis.
100%.
Could you define what metabolic health is for us and like what that means?
Yeah. So essentially there are 5 factors that ultimately determine your metabolic health and your body's ability to process calories and utilize those things as a human being. So I think the 5 categories are your waist size, which is your biggest predictor of your metabolic health, your resting blood sugar, your blood pressure levels, your lipid panels, and I believe there's one more thing. And so the interesting thing about metabolic health is that in America, we have this like aversion to lipid panels and cholesterol levels. So that's the biggest pushback that we get in regards to eating more red meat and saturated fat, is that it's ultimately going to increase the bad cholesterol, which is your LDL levels. And a lot of the research that I've done is that in a lot of cases, not only does it not increase your LDL cholesterol, but if it does increase your LDL cholesterol, as long as your HDL is really high and your triglycerides are really low, that's actually the golden ratio that you should be looking for, and your heart health is still really good. But the biggest thing is that if your waist size is the biggest indicator of your metabolic health, and you're eating animal products and you're eating saturated fat, and it's making your waist size get smaller, you're losing body fat percentage, why are we over solving for LDL when there's so many other factors that ultimately determine your metabolic health, especially when 88% of all Americans are metabolically unhealthy. So I think it's just like misguided information that, again, has happened within the last 50 years. Like really around the 1950s, we started developing this aversion to saturated fat. And it's a really interesting story. I don't know if you've heard about Eisenhower's heart attack, like it was either 1945 or 1954.
Tell me about it.
So President Eisenhower was in the Oval Office. He was playing golf. He had a heart attack, and the stock market absolutely plummeted. He was out of the office for a week. And at that time, we saw this epidemic of middle-aged men that were getting heart attacks. And we couldn't figure out why was there this epidemic of heart attacks and heart disease that was happening in the US. Now we know that Eisenhower was smoking 2 packs of cigarettes a day. The average American male was smoking like upwards of a pack of cigarettes a day, but we didn't put 2 and 2 together. What happened was there was this scientist out of the University of Minnesota. His name was Ansel Keys, and he firmly believed that the more saturated fat the American population ate, the higher instance of heart disease or heart attack would actually occur. So he conducted this study called the 7 country study, where he went to 7 different countries. And on the y-axis, it was incidence of heart attack. And then on the x-axis, it was the amount of saturated fat these countries were consuming. So he publishes the study. And when you look at the x and y-axis in the 7 countries, it looks like a perfect 1-to-1 correlation. So you look at it and you immediately go, okay, well, the more saturated fat these countries are eating, the higher likelihood of getting a heart attack they have. What a lot of people don't know is that there was close to 30 countries that were actually studied, but he intentionally omitted them because when you see them on the graph, there's like a very light correlation, but it's definitely not anywhere close to the 1-to-1. And he had an extremely bombastic personality. He was able to basically get a seat on the American Heart Association. The American Heart Association conveniently gets a $1.7 million donation from Procter & Gamble, which created Crisco, which is the first form of vegetable oil that we ever see in the United States. And so my point is that there are a lot of these stories that have happened that kind of lead me to believe that our current aversion to saturated fat and the dietary principles that we prize are really built off of like a house of straws and flawed science, which I know seems hard to believe because we seem so empirical in regards to the way that we think as a society. But when you look at the actual statistics of the fact that we're not healthy as a country, 7 out of 10 Americans are dying of chronic disease. It's like, well, clearly what we've been doing isn't working because these this data and these statistics, that wasn't the case. We were actually healthier 100 years ago than we are now.
I think it helps bring to the surface, like, to question where you're getting your information from. And also, it's kind of not our fault. It's if we're being told that, these are the statistics, there's a 1-to-1 correlation, and that's like the skewed research that we're finding, we're going to believe it.
Totally.
Because we don't have anything else guiding us in another way. The way that our culture has shifted entirely, the 100%. Way that, women are working more, there's more fast food on the go, happy hour culture. We're so busy in today's culture that food is often thought of as an after fact. It's like, I got to get all my stuff done, I got to work hard, and then I'll just grab whatever I can eat because I'm starving.
Yes.
And it creates such a snowball effect in terms of like not being educated on it, and then not even having the time or dedicating the time needed to cook a home meal and really focus on what you're eating.
100%. I think one of the things that you had written down was my definition of health. And for me, health is nourishment. And it very simply, it's eating single ingredient real foods that where every bite of food you eat is absolutely delicious, and it's also nourishing and filling you with vitamins and nutrients and vitality. And then you're sharing those meals with the people that you care about. And I know Italy is like somewhere that you've been multiple times, you've studied abroad there. I mean, wasn't there such a difference in like the way that they appreciate cuisine and share meals compared to the US when you studied abroad?
Oh yeah. It's funny because even when I go to a nutritionist, the first thing they told me was mindfully eat. Start to mindfully eat. And what that looks like is instead of, scrolling on your phone, eating over the TV, you are eating with community. You're eating with a friend or a partner or a family member. In Italy, when I go to visit, my family has a table as big as 25 people when I'm in town. They have everyone gather, they make home-cooked meals, everyone's laughing and drinking wine and enjoying. And there's, not only for our health, but for our soul, it's like being able to take that time to really chew your food, enjoy it, savor it, is something so ingrained in Italian culture. I wish that it was like that here.
Yes. And I think the cool thing of what you're saying is that it's so easy to look at these negative captions and these headlines. And, I think even partially how we grew our brand is we just exposed a lot of the things that we were seeing, and it's very focused. It's very easy to get focused on the negativity, but what we always bring it back to is like, there are a lot of simple but powerful things that we can all be doing to ultimately reclaim our health and put you in a position to feel as good as you've ever felt before. And that's the purpose of like eating nutrient dense foods and sharing meals with people and exercising and, sauna, cold plunging, all the different modalities that we love to do, is that it's supposed to fill you with energy so you can go out and live an amazing, badass life and really leave an incredible impact. It's not being healthy for the sake of having 6-packs at abs. It's being healthy for the sake of like actually having a positive contribution to society. And I think that's possible for everyone after they reclaim their metabolic health. It's like when you look at a cemetery or something like that, it's I sometimes think about, not just how many people have died of chronic disease, but how many people live lives of never launching the businesses they were supposed to launch, or being 50 plus pounds overweight, not being the best parents they could be, not having the right energy that they could have, all as a result of them like not knowing the right foods that they should be eating. So the stakes are really high, but the positive thing is that there are things that we could all be doing after listening to this podcast that you could immediately start to implement, and like very quickly you will feel incredible and live a completely different life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. With that, you were talking about all the different things that really make us well, Brett. What does wellness mean to you? Food is at the forefront of it. What else do you do personally that you found really makes an impact on your overall health?
Yeah. It's funny I think to figure out the answer to that question, I had to first figure out what were the things that almost made me feel like a shell of myself or made me not feel as good as I could possibly feel. And I honestly had a pretty rude awakening in college because, I've played baseball first at Seton Hall University. I was on scholarship there, transferred to a small school up in Boston called Babson College. And so I thought that I was healthy just because I was a college athlete and I was burning a lot of calories and I was performing at a high level. But going into my senior year, I started having like really, really bad stomach issues to the point where where I had to be near a toilet like almost every second of the day. Otherwise, I was like going to have to go to the bathroom, which is super embarrassing for a young guy who thinks that they're healthy in their early 20s. And I realized that because I was binge drinking every weekend, eating a ton of processed foods, chronically stressed out because of baseball and the pressure of school, not sleeping well, I ultimately developed an autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis. So basically my large intestine, my colon, just developed severe ulcers in like these bloody ulcers, and I couldn't digest or process any of the food that I was eating. And it was so bad that, you know, I ended up getting rushed to the hospital the last day of my internship, got a colonoscopy, got diagnosed with this disease. And my doctor never once talked to me about diet and lifestyle levers that I was either pulling or I wasn't pulling. The thing is, my doctor's a great guy. I have a lot of sympathy for him, but he told me that I have a genetic predisposition to getting sick. So don't beat yourself up too much. You probably would have gotten this disease no matter what. And we have to put you on these drugs to make sure you stay in remission, because what they tell you with autoimmune disease is that they're incurable. So remission is like the best possible outcome. So I was immediately on a bunch of prednisone, which is an oral steroid. I was on an oral drug called Lialda, and then I was on a biologic drug called Remicade that I would get administered via blood infusion every 8 weeks. And I just thought I was going to have to be on that drug for the rest of my life. And what happened was I started doing more research on the internet in 2019 when I was 24 years old, because I was noticing just incidentally when I would cook my meals, I would actually feel better. So when I was eating steak and chicken and eggs and animal products, I felt really good. And I was curious about that. And then I started finding out about this concept of a carnivore diet where you essentially eat all animal products. And the thought process behind the diet is that, like we were talking about earlier, meat is wrongly demonized. It's some of the most nutrient dense foods you can actually be eating, but it's also incredibly bioavailable compared to vegetables, which means that your body can actually utilize and absorb those nutrients. And the more that I was researching it, there were people that were following this diet for years that were saying that they had had similar autoimmune diseases to me, like ulcerative colitis, Crohn's, rheumatoid arthritis, et cetera, that were curing these diseases just by following this diet. And so for me, being really young and curious, you know, I don't want to live a life where I'm attached to medication every 8 weeks. Like, I can't go on vacation because I have to get back to New Jersey to get this IV administered. I was like, well, I really have nothing to lose. Why not try the diet? I'll do it for a week. If it doesn't feel good, I'll just go back to what I was doing before. And literally within the first few days, Sabrina, I was profoundly different. This burning inflammation that I had in my stomach, that went away. My skin got healthier. My energy got better. I was like popping out of bed at 4 a.m. every single day to go to the gym, and just like grateful to be alive and be young and be in the society that we're currently in. Like, I was putting on muscle at the gym. I was working harder at my job, was just like a happier, kinder person. And the more that I did it, the better and better I felt, and just went deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole. Flash forward to 2021, which was 2 years later after following that diet really strictly, which was basically steak, chicken, fish, eggs, cooked in olive oil, cooked in beef tallow, drank spring water, drank a little bit of black coffee, just doing that consistently and getting those reps in. I was deemed medically cured. I had no inflammation. I had no microinflammation. And I was the first patient that my doctor ever had where he was comfortable getting me off of those biologic drugs that I was told that I was going to be on for the rest of my life. So I know that's a really long answer to your question, but my point was that eating super nutrient dense foods, prioritizing sleep, minimizing my stress, going to get some type of exercise every single day, even if it was just 10,000 steps a day, just something simple, doing the unsexy things over a long-term time horizon, that was ultimately what healed me. And those are the pillars of how I approach my life. I believe that this whole process should be fun. It should be enjoyable. It should be low stress. And you should be doing things that ultimately make you feel like you're a better version of yourself. Like, if it doesn't make you happier and you're not enjoying it, you're probably doing something wrong, because I think that there's a diet for everyone where every bite of food is amazing. You look forward to it and you're actually feeling really healthy and you're losing weight and you're ultimately increasing your vitality.
Brett, it's so important that you share your story with us and that people get to hear what you went through. Oftentimes, like you said, it's embarrassing to share something like that. I had been diagnosed with lymphocytic colitis, and eosinophilic esophagitis a couple of years ago after experiencing my own issues. It's not the most sexy thing to talk about.
No.
And a lot of the times I feel like people can be in isolation when they're going through these things, or kind of justifying that it's okay to have these reactions. It's like, oh, well, this is just what happens every time after I heavily drink or I have, a tub of ice cream. Like, it's fine, whatever it is. It's so important to be aware, hence the title of my podcast, but really being more aware of how we're feeling and talking to people about it. I think it's a very great point that you make. I have so much respect for doctors and medical professionals. They've helped my dad through cancer, and I've been in the hospital plenty from surgeries and things like that. But I do think that there is a gap between when you get diagnosed with something and doctors have a lot of patients to see. Their insurance companies are begging them to get even more in there. They don't have a lot of time with you, and often they put a Band-Aid solution on things.
Definitely.
I've been on prednisone a lot in my life.
Yes.
Omeprazole for a long time, which also can cause early onset Alzheimer's. After I got diagnosed, I was doing research about it. For eosinophilic esophagitis especially, there's only 7 specialists in the country who have the education and the schooling to provide help. I tried calling all of them when I got diagnosed, and everyone was not taking patients for 2 years because the amount of people that have been diagnosed with this disease from the 1990s has skyrocketed to today. It has increased so much, and I know that there's a correlation between how we're processing our foods and people actually getting tested for it. Because when my doctor, she told me that I had IBS and acid reflux, and she told me to just be less stressed and follow this diet that she thought could help. And I did it for a year while still battling all these issues. And I went back and was like, hey, something's still wrong. I'm doing everything you're saying. And she kind of rolled her eyes and was like, sure, we'll do a colonoscopy and endoscopy. And she's like, I'll call you if something happens in like 2 weeks. A week later, I get the call from her, and she was like, is now a good time? I was like, yeah, what's up? And that's when she told me that I had these 2 illnesses that I was diagnosed with. And she was like, just stay on the medicine, just keep doing it. And there was no discussion about lifestyle changes or what I could be eating. I found out that this disease can be triggered by gluten, dairy, eggs, shellfish, and nuts. Also, if anyone's listening and experiences this themselves, to me, it felt like really bad acid reflux and a lot of tightness in my chest. It would be hard to swallow if I was not eating proper. So I decided I was going to be running the New York City Marathon. And I said, if I'm actually going to do this, I can't keep feeling like shit every day.
Totally.
I have to get whatever this is under control because I'm truly not going to make it. So during the time when I was training, I was like, I'm going to get off all of the things that this disease triggers. I'm going to get my health to a good place. And then I'm going to start reintroducing slowly these things and try to figure out what it is that's bothering me. Because I know when I don't feel good. They wanted me to do 6 endoscopies and 6 biopsies with elimination diets to figure it out. I was like, I don't want to go through all that trauma and the damage of getting all of this done if I can be patient and just listen to myself and figure it out. So I think both of us, can relate in so many ways to knowing that something's wrong and wanting so badly to find something that is different than the medicine or the transfusions or whatever we're told is the only solution, when there's rarely in life only one solution to everything. People listening, I'm sure, might be going through similar things and may just be brushing it off. So if you are, go to the doctor, get some tests. Tests are a great way to understand what's going on and see your actual biological levels. Why do people demonize meat? And why do you think that people should eat more meat?
It's such a good question. And it's such a loaded question too. Well, I think number one, meat is incredibly easy to demonize, right? It's delicious, it's ruby red, it's bloody, there's death that's associated with it in order to produce the meat that we're consuming. I do think it traces back to the demonization of saturated fat that we've seen the last 50 or so years. And I think it's also easy to manipulate a lot of data around why meat consumption isn't good. And so I really resonate with a lot of the things that you talked about, where it's very easy to take a snippet of this podcast and be like, oh, both Sabrina and Brett are anti-Western medicine. And we're not at all. Like you just said, there are so many things that you're grateful for and I'm grateful for about Western medicine. But at the same time, if Western medicine was the end all be all, 80% of Americans wouldn't be overweight or obese, and we wouldn't be spending billions of dollars every single year trying to treat chronic diseases. Just like insulin alone treating type 2 diabetes, which is largely preventable on a low carbohydrate diet, like the expenses of that are absolutely astronomical. So my point is that you have to take a lot of this stuff with a grain of salt. And what we do with a lot of these epidemiological studies is that epidemiological studies are survey-based. So you're asking someone about their red meat consumption. But the problem is that we just lump all red meat together. So like processed salami gets lumped in the same category as regenerative steak from a grass-finished farm in Texas or New York or something like that. Those are two completely different food groups, but we're lumping those things together so people immediately are like, oh, when I go to the data, this person is eating red meat, they have a higher instance of heart disease or cancer. It must be the red meat that's causing that. So in my perspective, it's like, well, is it the red meat that's causing it, or is it the burger bun of which the meat was consumed with, the milkshake and the seed oil laced fries all combined together that's potentially causing that heart disease that you're talking about too. So I really think it's a matter of flawed science. And the other thing too is that Americans aren't actually eating as much meat as you think. There's an amazing book and documentary called Sacred Cow by Dr. Diana Rogers that I recommend everyone watches. I think it's on Amazon Video for free, and it's one of the most impactful hour-long documentaries that you'll ever watch. But one of the studies that she references is that the average American only consumes less than 2 ounces of red meat per day. So it's like, it's hard for me to believe that something that we're only eating less than 2 ounces of is causing, you know, the obesity, the tendency to be overweight, all these other diseases that we're talking about too. So I think it's just this combination of flawed science, propaganda, misunderstanding about the environment, regenerative agriculture, et cetera, that's really led to this demonization. And it's allowed processed food companies to continue to shill these like frankenfoods that you and I both ultimately believe are causing metabolic dysfunction. And what I found is that the more people that I've met that have run towards animal products, single ingredient God foods that God ultimately creates, get away from the man-made foods, that's when your body ultimately learns how to metabolize these things. It's able to heal, it's able to create abundant energy, and really is going to allow you to thrive.
And something that I think is really important too for people to understand is sourcing.
Yes.
So you talked about the example of you know, a processed salami pack versus like grass-fed. If someone's looking to incorporate more meat into their diet, where's the best places where they can source it from, and where's kind of like a middle ground that kind of like the average person could, if they don't have, you know, access to so many resources, what would you recommend?
I think social media does a lot of good, but it's also incredibly confusing and overwhelming too, because you'll have someone that's telling you to eat all red meat. It doesn't matter if it's grain-fed from a feedlot, it's good. And then you have someone that's telling you if it's not regenerative from your local farmer, it's absolutely terrible. Don't even touch it. So for the average consumer that's just learning this stuff and wants to make some solid change, they don't really know where to start. I have these really good friends based out of West Texas, Ann and Weldon Warren. They're a really cute couple. They have this ranch called Holy Cow Beef, and they subscribe to the good, better, best model. And so the good, better, best model is that all meat is good. So if your starting point is you're just buying meat at the butcher counter at the local ShopRite or the grocery store, and it's grain-fed, maybe it comes from a feedlot, that is still far better for you than 99% of the processed foods that are found in the grocery store. So that's good. Better is grass-fed meat, or the cow, grass-fed, grass-finished meat, where the cow is actually fed grass, grazing out in pasture for the entirety of its life. You find that the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is better. There's probably going to be more micronutrients in it. And then best is grass-finished meat from a regenerative ranch that's close to you. So you're having all of the benefits of the nutrient density of the cow that's being raised through humane practices. But if it's regenerative, that means that the farmer is basically farming in harmony with God. So they're not using fertilizers, they're not tilling, they're not doing these kind of like modern destructive practices to the land. The cow is actually able to like fertilize the soil on its own and create really good nutrient dense soil that supports the environment, and will, like, typically if you see a cow that's incorporating regenerative practices, you'll see thousands of new species that are created just by having a herd of cattle on the land. It's pretty incredible. And I've talked to farmers that have seen that. So my point is that there's different degrees of where you can go. When I was sick and wanted to heal, I didn't know anything about regenerative. I didn't know anything about grain-fed versus grass-fed meat. I just wanted to try and get my health in order. So I was just buying, I was literally living in the Upper East Side, buying like the budget cuts of meat at the grocery store. And that still helped me heal my stomach. And then as I learned more and did my research, I started finding local farmers, et cetera. And that kind of got me the last like 10% of the way there. But I think just starting simple and buying single ingredient foods at the outer aisle is going to get you to such a good spot. If you are looking to connect with your local rancher, there are some amazing websites and platforms that are out there. There's this great organization that we work with called the Beef Initiative. So they supply a list of ranchers by state that do things regeneratively. They're all approved and vetted. You can go out, you can connect with them, you can ask them as many questions as you want. There's also a great website called eatwild.com. And then there's also a platform called Good Ranchers, which I think is a better version of ButcherBox, because a lot of people don't know with Butcher's Box is that they get a lot of their meat from different countries like Brazil, South America, et cetera, where Good Ranchers basically aggregates meat from different ranchers across the US. And then you can just go on the platform and buy there. But my point is that don't put too much pressure on yourself. Just start correcting the foods that you should be eating, and then just gradually start to figure out, farms in your area. Start going to farmers market, asking really good questions. And a lot of times with these ranchers, they just want to meet their customers so badly because they're literally incentivized to provide you with the best meat possible. Because if they don't nourish you, Sabrina's never going to go back to them again. So they want to meet you, they want you to ask questions, and they do such hard work to create such a good product.
I really appreciate you sharing these resources, Brett. One of my biggest things on this show that I love when guests do is they provide tangible resources that people can go to. I think it can be so overwhelming to dive in if you're looking to get into it, to go online, to try to figure it out. And hearing, your expertise and these recommended places, I think is so great for people to be able to hit the ground running a little bit easier if they're trying to make a shift in their life and live a healthier lifestyle. So I appreciate you sharing all of that. It's funny when we're thinking about God's ingredients and the food that he's putting on this planet. My grandma is 99. She's from Italy. She doesn't speak English. She is the meanest person that I've ever met. So like no one can hurt me more than my grandma's like Italian tough words to me. But she is tough as nails. She does not take 1 ounce of medicine. She has always had, they had a farm in Italy when she lived there. She spent most of her life eating home cooked meals, natural ingredients. She loves steak. She loves meat. And I think she's been such an inspiration to me too, just physically seeing someone who is so strong. She doesn't use a cane or a walker or anything. She goes up and down flights of stairs in Montgomery every day at my parents' house. And like that is why all of this is so important. It is, yes, it's about tomorrow and the next day, but it's also about 50 years in the future.
Yes.
The way we take care of ourselves today and the amount of work that we put into it will continue to reflect at every stage of our life. I want to be the grandma that's running around in the backyard with the grandkids, being able to physically play sports with them and be active. And so much of that will be determined on how well I take care of my body. during this time.
That's such a powerful point that you bring up. And what you're describing, I just call it your motivational focal point. So like you can arm someone with every possible blueprint they can follow, the perfect diet plan, the perfect exercise routine. You can get them a Whoop strap, you can get them a really nice gym membership to Lifetime or something like that. But if they don't have that like intrinsic motivation or that motivational focal point that compels them to make a change, then none of it matters. And you have to, I think it's a really good exercise for someone like in the beginning of their healing journey or their weight loss journey to really like write out, why do you want to get healthy and why do you want to be as healthy as you can be? And for me, what I come back to is like, I want to be, similar to you. I want to be an amazing dad. I want to be a grandpa. I want to be the grandpa that can do an Ironman with my grandson. I want to be able to build the best business that I can build and impact people. And those are the things that will continue to, it almost pulls you on the right track. And when I was really sick, I almost felt like I had flip that switch where I was like, this old version of myself, this version of myself that's binge drinking and eating like garbage and not sleeping or prioritizing my health, that's done. That's no longer who I am. And I'm going to fall in love with this, like this healing process and that healing journey. And even if it doesn't work, I know that I'm going to become a better person on the other end of it. And it sounds like that's a very similar thing to what happened to you, where you were like, look, I'm not getting answers from my doctor. So it's ultimately up to me to become the CEO of my own health. And you listed out those reasons why you wanted to get healthy. And that's basically you going through that healing process was like the catalyst for the podcast right now and all the lives that you're going to go on to impact too. But you need to have that motivation.
Yeah. And it changes your life completely.
It does.
The way that you take care of yourself and the food that you put into your body truly changes your life. And if you are like down and depressed and you're gaining weight and you're not sure what's going on, like there are solutions out there. And you can reach out to people to seek help. You can reach out to people for advice, not talking about things. Clearly, we both like to talk because we both got a podcast. But
we do.
Like that is, I truly think the key in life in community is really finding people's specialties where they have so much knowledge in and learning from them. I have so much and to continue to learn from you in the space of meat and food. And without that awareness, like I could be, stuck where I was 2 years ago if I didn't decide to make the change, reach out, look for help, look for resources. It's so important that you know that your life and your destiny is in your own hands, which is pretty cool.
Definitely. And I feel like for whatever reason, Western medicine, they almost discourage the power of the story where they just label it as anecdote. And like, just because Sabrina healed what you were going through, that's like, you're an outlier case and there are a lot of different variables. And for me, the reason why I was able to heal was similar to you. I was literally on Reddit. I was on YouTube. I was listening to podcasts of other people that had a similar disease to what I had, but they were able to pull the right levers to successfully heal themselves. And had I continued to listen to my doctor or conventional GIs, I would still be on drugs that cost $400,000 a year, similar to you, causing a whole other host of side effects that might have affected me long term, versus now I'm drug free, I have no inflammation, I'm in the best health of my life. Now I'm creating my own podcast, distilling this information. Other people are listening to your show, they're listening to my show, and they're healing themselves and getting off of their drugs and medication. So it's like, I just don't subscribe to that theory that your doctor is your overlord and you have to listen to everything that they're saying. It's like, I think that your doctor is your consultant and you ultimately have autonomy over what makes you feel good or what it doesn't, and take your doctor's input seriously. But ultimately it's up to you. No one knows your body better than you. No one's going to care about your body more than you are. And you have to take in all this information and then figure out the right direction that you should go, and you'll be in an amazing spot.
100%. And so many people to that very point, people that I've talked to have, and my own experience of going to the doctor and then kind of having them tell you that you don't really know what you're talking about, that you don't have any diseases, you're fine, you have IBS, stop being so nervous, whatever it is. Like, it's kind of like gaslighting in the doctor world of like, just know that if you get a kind of broad diagnosis or you're really not sure that may be what's going on, get a second opinion.
Yes.
Talk to someone else who might have a different perspective. Again, going back to that authoritative way that we view doctors and adults as a kid, if you have that same mentality growing up that anyone you talk to knows everything about everything,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not questioning an ounce of what they're saying. Like, do your research, look out there, try to find it out for yourself, because at the end of the day, they got a next patient to see and you're forgotten about.
100%.
But in the end of the day, you are your biggest advocate.
Yes.
You have to be.
You have to be. And to your point, I'm pretty sure the average doctor in the US, it's somewhere between like 20 to 50 patient visits a day. And the average visit is anywhere from like 7 to 15 minutes, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's so interesting to me that you're taking a patient that you really don't know, you're quickly looking at their medical records, and then they're like, oh, Sabrina needs this antibiotic, or Brett needs that antibiotic.
Mm-hmm.
For me, my experience with that was in 2021. I'd been on Remicade for about 5 years, and like 4 years into taking it, I randomly started developing cystic acne, and it was like all over my body. I've never had skin issues before, but like anywhere I would sweat, so like under my beard line, my chest, my back, my arms, I started getting this weird reaction in the cystic acne everywhere. Mm-hmm. And kind of similar to you, I had this intuitive feeling that it was something in regards to the Remicade that all of a sudden wasn't agreeing with my body. And so my GI told me to go to a dermatologist. The dermatologist got me on doxycycline and some other oral
Mm-hmm.
antibiotic. That didn't work. Went to another dermo, same exact prescription. Went to another dermo, same exact thing. And I was eventually like, these guys, they're not putting two and two together, that I think it's the Remicade. They weren't comfortable getting me off of it. And then I eventually just worked up the courage to go to my GI, and I just said, I have a really strong feeling that I think it's this medication that you've had me on that's causing this for me. I want to get another colonoscopy, and I want to get off the drug for good. And so I had the colonoscopy, had zero inflammation, had zero microinflammation, and he was comfortable taking me off of the drug, which I haven't been back on for 3 years. But had I not worked up that courage, or you worked up that courage too, I would still be on those drugs that were causing these like chronic skin
Mm-hmm.
breakouts. It was crazy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, it's a Band-Aid factor. It's like so
Yes.
easy to think that like just more and more medicine, more antibiotics will solve the acne, more, this will help that. But really, when you look at what you're doing, there's so many answers just taking a look at what you're putting into your body and how you're
Yes.
living your life.
Totally.
Brett, I want to talk about Noble Origins.
Yeah.
Talk to me about why you started Noble Origins, what it is, and just what it's been like in the entrepreneurial path.
No, I appreciate you asking that question. And we were talking before, because I love that clip that you posted on your Instagram a couple months ago about you when you were like 8 years old, you were like reporting the news at school, and you were so polished and professional and cute. It's an incredible clip.
Thanks.
But my point is that I think a lot of times when you're younger, the things that interested you when you were younger are ultimately the things that you should be doing as an adult. And I think society kind of like beats those natural urges and impulses out of you, and you're pushed to go down this conventional path. And I felt very similarly to that, where when I was younger, or even when I was in college, I was an entrepreneurial major, but I never knew the business. I didn't know what my God-given mission was, or what I should be doing. So I just followed this safe, conventional path and just went into a tech sales role. And I liked sales more so because I was competitive, but it wasn't my God-given mission. And so when I started doing the podcast and creating content and writing blogs and Twitter threads, I really felt like that was my God-given mission. Like he had finally answered what I was supposed to be doing. And so through the podcast, I feel like we're distilling the information that we wish everyone knew. And then a lot of times when you build an audience, your audience tells you the things that they want. And so our audience, we were getting tons of requests of what protein powders do you recommend? What supplements do you recommend taking? In the more research that Harry, my co-founder, and I were doing, we realized that there were very few protein powders that were delicious, minimal ingredient, and really incorporated that nose to tail philosophy that we've both thrived on for the last 5 years. Because like I was saying, we really eat very little meat. And if we're eating meat, we only eat muscle meat, where nose to tail is basically encapsulating all of the nutrients of the animal. So the organs, bone marrow, collagen, the connective tissue, there's all these nutrients that you get from a nose to tail approach that you don't get when you're just eating muscle meat. So we decided to create Noble Origins, which is a nose to tail protein shake. So in one scoop, you're getting 21 grams of beef protein, You're getting a grass-fed organ complex. You're getting colostrum, which is the first milk of the mother cow. It's really good for your digestive health. And then you're getting all that connective tissue through collagen too, but you're getting it in one scoop, and it actually tastes good because a lot of people are squeamish around like eating raw organs and things like that, which I totally understand. So our thesis was, can you give people all of these nutrients in a single scoop, but make it chocolate flavored or vanilla flavor and actually make it taste like a chocolate milkshake or a vanilla milkshake?
Are you chocolate or vanilla fan? Which is your favorite?
Chocolate's my favorite.
Yeah.
Chocolate is the best seller, but a lot of people like vanilla because if you like frozen fruits and things like that in your smoothies, the vanilla mixes really well with things like that. But I just love chocolate with like some milk and ice and keeping it super simple. Yeah, we got to get you. We're going to get you some product too.
I'm so excited.
We need you on the Noble train.
I'm so excited. I'm already a huge fan.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited to work with you, and like your target audience is exactly who we would love to connect with, and we want to get the product to more women. 70% of our customer base is women, which is really surprising because our podcast is more male dominated. And what we were learning is that so many women struggle to hit their protein goals. But if you make a really delicious shake that's like easy to consume, like a scoop of Noble is only 85 calories and it's 21 grams of protein. So if you have a scoop and a half, that's like a really easy way to help hit those protein goals for the day and get in a lot of those nutrients. Like we have a lot of pregnant women that drink the shake. We have women that had like lost their cycle and then regained their cycle by drinking Noble in addition to cooking their meals and eating more animal products and things like that. So yeah, we started the business about a year ago, knew literally nothing about the supplement space and CPG, but had an audience, we had the motivation and have built a great team around us. And we're really just trying to like, honestly, just change the food system one scoop at a time.
I love that. I love that, Brett. I'm so happy that you really leaned into your God-given talent and your mission in trying to just create better and healthier lives for people. It's really super inspiring what you've been doing, and I just truly can't wait to see where Noble goes to. But in terms of women's health that you were mentioning, I feel like women kind of don't always realize how much protein or meat that they need. Why is it important for women specifically? A lot of my audience is women, so I feel like it's good to kind of help educate them on the importance.
Yeah, I think there's this misconception with female nutrition that things like lifting weights or eating protein is going to make you really, really bulky. Like you see a lot of these like bodybuilders and things like that. And I think there's this misconception that as women, if I lift heavy weights or if I eat more protein, it's going to make me bulky as well. And that's absolutely not the case. Like a lot of times the women that I know that are in the best shape and have the best hormone markers are eating the most protein and eating the heaviest weights too. Because like lifting really strenuous weight is actually a great way to get really lean and build that lean muscle that a lot of women are looking for. But we've heard these incredible stories on the podcast of so many different women that had either like minimized red meat consumption or completely eliminated it and were either vegan or raw vegan, that were losing their periods. They couldn't get pregnant. Their hormones were completely messed up when they would get blood work done. And then they started eating more animal products. And then when they retested their blood work, their hormone markers were amazing. They were getting their period back. They were actually able to get pregnant. So there are a lot of fertility specialists that are recommending women start to drink raw milk and eat red meat and eat really good pasture-raised eggs and get all that good, healthy cholesterol. And a lot of these nutrients that you can't get through vegetables or you can't get through processed foods, you're actually able to get those only through animal products as well. So I think there's some really good links that we could put into the show notes too of those specific nutrients and things like that. But it's like, I view life and animal products, like there's a strong correlation between those two things, and women can benefit from those things more than anyone. And I'm sure you see it too. Like when you start to eat those right foods and kind of like reclaim your metabolic health, I can actually tell like with women who are eating the right foods and who aren't, because the women that are, there's almost like this glow to your skin that you can't really quantify. You just know it when you see it too. There's this great documentary, 20-minute documentary on YouTube called Nourished, and it's by Heart and Soil, which is Paul Saladino's company, and it talks a lot about animal-based pregnancy. And so they go to this midwife in Texas, and they show you two different placentas from moms that just gave birth. One was a plant-based placenta and the other was an animal-based placenta. And the plant-based placenta was like this very dull, like pinkish color to it. And the animal-based one was like this really dark, like ruby red coloring. And she was saying that like eating these foods, it's not just for you, but it's literally going to basically instill in your child the nutrients that they should be getting at a super young age. So just seeing that comparison visually was like, it was unbelievable.
I think you're absolutely right that women are nervous for the most part to kind of do manly things like eat red meat and lift weights. And I really want to help to break that stigma and be a part of the good change. Because I do eat a ton of red meat now, and I do lift weights, and I'm seeing such a change in myself that, from 2 years ago, I wouldn't have even known where I would be today compared to then, like how I feel, and then even how I look. I can be the same weight, but like there's more muscle versus fat, and it's just been super awesome for me to see, and I will definitely link those show notes that you have those episodes with other females too for people to listen to that they can check out and really hear some more great stories.
That's incredible. Yeah. And I'm not saying too, like I know from a male perspective, it could be super easy for me to be like, oh, just like eat more meat. Like I think there are differences in the way that men do on a carnivore diet versus women. I've seen some pretty compelling evidence. Like there are certain women that I know that have done really well on a carnivore diet. And then depending on where women are in their cycle, like there are a lot of women that actually do well introducing like almost timing their carbohydrates depending on where they are in their cycle. So I'm not saying you need to like cut out fruits and vegetables and things like that. Like that's not the argument that I'm making. I would just be curious for a woman that's listening to this and maybe feels like there's another level that she could tap into, just incorporating a little bit more fish or another serving of eggs, or try some grass-fed meat or some grass-fed bison and things like that, and just see how you feel. Because there are so many women that I know that have claimed that just getting their nutrition under control is like the gateway to changing their life ultimately. And clearly you're like the shining example of that too.
Thank you. No, you're absolutely right. Now, Brett, I know we're coming up on time here, so I want to get through a couple of more questions with you. If you could give someone one piece of advice who is looking to change their life or where to start, what would you recommend that they kind of do?
I would say, I think sometimes the best thing is a little bit of shock therapy. So I like to do a nice 30-day challenge where for 30 days you cook every single one of your meals. You only eat products in the outer aisle of the grocery store, so real food. So meat, fish, eggs, fruits, vegetables, milk, butter, coffee, like only single ingredient food. If there's a label, you're not eating it at all. It's just a single ingredient food. Cooking every single one of your meals. And then depending on what weight you're at, eat a gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight. So if you're doing the challenge at 210, but you want to get down to 180, eat 180 grams of animal protein per day. Do one form of exercise per day, walk 10,000 steps per day, and sleep 8 hours. And I guarantee you that from day 1 to day 30, you're going to feel like a drastically different person. And then the caveat with that challenge is I highly encourage everyone that's trying to heal to keep a healing journal. And so what I do with the healing journal is I write down the time of my meals, what I'm eating, and then my energy levels on a scale of 1 to 4. 4 is like, I want to jump up and run a marathon after I ate this food. 1 is like, I want to pass out under my desk. And the really cool thing about that healing journal is you pick up on pattern recognition throughout the month. So within 2 weeks of doing it, you're going to understand, okay, rice makes me feel good. Sweet potatoes doesn't. Red meat sits well. Chicken doesn't. You just pick up on this pattern recognition. And then by the end of it, you basically have a template of what makes you feel really, really good. So it's like a little bit of shock therapy that I like to do.
That's great advice. Anyone listening who wants to do the 30-day challenge, the 2-month challenge, reach out to Brett and I. Let us know how you're feeling, what you're doing. Would love to hear your stories and be able to share them out too. If you could give someone kind of like a 30-second rundown of how to cook the perfect steak, how would you do it?
Yeah, so I do 99% of my cooking on the cast iron. So you need a nice cast iron. Take out your steak, pat it down with a paper towel so you kind of get the moisture out of it. So it's going to help it develop that really good crust. Season your steak, salt, pepper, garlic powder, paprika, whatever you like. You could even just use salt and pepper. Turn the stove up to high. Cook with either butter, beef tallow, olive oil, ghee, olive oil and butter have a lower smoke point. So if you put the stove on high, it might burn a little bit. Butter and beef tallow, or ghee and beef tallow, won't burn. Get your steak in there. You should hear like a loud sizzle when you put it in. And if you're going for medium rare, which is like my favorite temperature to cook the steak, around like 3 to 4 minutes each side, pull it off and then let it sit for 5 minutes and then slice into it, top it with a little bit of butter, balsamic vinegar, and then you'll have an incredible steak. But it's so simple too. Mm-hmm. We think these things are really complicated. Like steak, like we said, pull it out of the package, season it, sear it, cut it, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now everyone knows how to make the perfect steak.
Exactly. We're going to have to test you. We're going to have to videotape you cooking and see how you do.
Honestly, Parker's been helping me get better, watching him too. It's hard cooking meat alone. Sometimes I think as a girl, I definitely got intimidated a ton.
Yeah.
Up until recently, but really just leaning into your friends and the people around you that are making a dang good steak, you can learn a thing or two.
Parker makes a good steak.
He does.
He thinks he's Gordon Ramsay, but he's pretty good.
He kind of is.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
If you could have dinner with any guest, who would you want to sit down with and share a big steak with?
I think it would be easy. I think just doing a steak with my dad, like that's something I've always looked forward to, is just going home. Like I have so many memories of, like, my dad used to work in New York, which is why I wanted to work in the city as well too. I have so many memories like going to the city with him when I'm younger. And it was always really cool when I lived and worked in the city. A lot of times, like once a week, we would just meet up for a really good meal, have some wine, just have some conversation. And he's someone that's always really led by example. So he would be amazing. And then another person who I wish I could have met would have been Teddy Roosevelt. I just loved his life philosophy of like just the strenuous life. And when you read his biographies, people would always say that he had the most incredible energy. Like you just felt his aura and his presence. And he was kind of this self-made person that just turned himself into who he was. And he's someone that I almost try and like embody that energy, even though I've never met him before. So probably those two people.
Those are the most wholesome answers I've ever heard.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
I'm a simple guy.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Brett, for taking the time today, for coming on I'm Well Aware, sharing your wisdom with me and my audience. I know so many people will benefit from hearing your perspective on this. If you haven't already, go check out Meat Mafia podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts. Mm-hmm. And I really just feel like we need to have another conversation because there's so much more that I know that we can talk about. Definitely. Yeah, I appreciate you so much for having me on. I'm so excited just to see the work that you're doing with your show. And I just have this feeling, I was talking to Dana about this, we both agree that like you just have that X factor where I can't wait to see where the show is at, where the space the show is in a year from now. And I think we're both also a good example of like, you can use social media to your detriment, or you can use it as a tool to like reconnect with amazing people that you grew up with and like form new relationships at a later point in your life. And you just don't know what it's going to lead to. So I feel like we're a cool example of that, but I appreciate you so much for having me on. This is so much fun. Of course. Thank you. Yeah. If you are looking for people to connect to, you can look back at high school and find a great friend later on in life that you maybe didn't know before. Absolutely. Well. Thank you so much. Thanks again. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you back here next week on the path to becoming more aware.